Welcome to Wellness Radio with Dr. Jeanette Gallagher as your host. Her show discusses topics of health, wellness, and spirituality and is about discovering your place in this great universe from your cells to the cosmos. Along with her guest, in casual conversation, she strives to ask the difficult questions that may be holding you back from a vibrant life and shares new ideas that may inspire you to make a change in your life that you only can see in your dreams. And now, here is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Wellness Radio. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and it's a pleasure to have you with us here this evening. Tonight, we are going to be talking about relationships, engagement in conversation, engagement in lives, engagement in communication through this life story we are in. How do we engage and hold the space for ourselves, for others to come to us in peace, safety, and security, and also unconditional love? What is the relationship all about? It truly is about our soul inside of our being, looking through the human, as we call it, wetsuit, with all of its badges and all of its kind of life experiences that are tacked on. And we see through this to engage with another. What happens when that wetsuit becomes very cluttered? There's a lot of badges, a lot of filters, and a lot of ways in which we judge, and a lot of ways in which we project, and a lot of ways in which we perceive another. Can we ever truly get through that to be able to see ourselves in a higher plane, a different scope, perhaps stripped of all of the stories? Is it even possible in this human existence? On this radio show over the last 13, 14 years, we've spoken about this from many different aspects. How can we let go of our badges, be able to step into the soul and spirit of who we truly are, and each day write a new story and let everything else go? We are so tied up with the human story. We want it to be this way. We expect it to be that way. And that is the way it's going to be. Wow, what a rocky road we have all given to each other. Perhaps today, my guests are Leslie and Lindsey Glass. Their book is The Mother-Daughter Relationship Makeover, 4 Steps to Bring Back the Love. Today we'll be talking about what to do when you actually come into the awareness and something's not working. And do you step back? Do you retreat and maybe take a time and say, okay, what do I really want going forward? That's really a question we all need to ask each other. Leslie and Lindsey, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
We're delighted.
I'm so glad to have you because this book actually does speak to me because I've had so many tosses and turns within my own relationships, but also, too, I work so much with patients at the end of life, and this really is the number one, as we would say, regret, guilt, shame, perception, loss of time, and maybe a lot of angst in people's hearts. Don't you think so?
Oh, absolutely. No question at all. Yeah.
Yes, no question.
You know, when I think about it, when we think about the word a relationship, how do you all define it? Because when I think of the word relationship, I say, can we have it without all this eyes on it? Like when we say a relationship, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Most people will say, my father, my brother, my sister, my workplace, my this, my that. It's almost as if it's ownership of the other, and it's already defined the path that you're going to go down, perhaps?
I think that's a really interesting thing to say, and I absolutely agree. I think we have these societal conceptions around these words, and I totally agree. There is ownership around that, and I think really particularly to the mother-daughter relationship, that sense of moms wanting ownership and daughters wanting freedom, that you actually hit the nail on where a lot of the problems stem for a lot of mothers and daughters.
I just think of the word relationship as the exchanges between us, the exchanges in terms of communication and wills and wants and desires. Relationships is all about two people or more than two people in exchanges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think sometimes the word relationship gets so stuck up. I know for myself, being almost 70, I have done a lot of spiritual work, being a medium, being open this entire lifetime. I really have been that kind of observer of the world around me versus being able to be tethered to it. Sometimes a relationship, just as you shared, can tether you to a definition, a defining it's almost like you're going down this road. This is the way you're going to go, and that's the way it's going to be, especially when you think of mother and daughter, this is what your expectations are. The road signs have been put up there, and you just have to follow along, and that's the way it's going to be, and everything will be okay. But we see that over the decades, those road signs, guideposts, and even the highway of the template has changed. People have changed. Life circumstances have changed. What we want from life, what we get in life, and what we go through in life have been so varied and so explosive over the last 100 years. I think we haven't even stopped to recognize that and change the definition of a relationship. Perhaps.
I think that is such an astute thing, and we've actually talked about this too. We're dealing with definitions and ideas about family relationships that have not been updated and do not actually represent the change in times. And what you were saying is so right. We have generations of history in us, our moms, our grandmothers, our great-grandmothers. And sometimes these traditions and these ideas that come from, decades ago, sometimes 100 years ago, not only, I think the desire for many people is to want to carry on tradition and have things stay the same. But I think we know that not only is that not realistic, but the world is changing so fast that we're constantly struggling to catch up with it. So I believe that a lot of conflict between mothers and daughters comes from the fact that daughters look different, talk different, want different things, and that is all okay, yet we're still going by some guidelines that were probably more true for, 50, 100 years ago.
I think social media has changed everyone's behavior and everyone's expectations. So I think that expectations have changed. What daughters want from their mothers or don't want from their mothers it means that that mothers don't have as much influence over their daughters as they used to, and I think that is extremely complicated and difficult for moms.
I know for myself, a lot, my kids said, "Do not follow me, do not friend me on social, stay off of my stuff." And it's like, oh, well, okay then. You know what I mean? And I kind of took it as a very big affront in the beginning. Like, what do you mean, And then I stood back and I said, you know what? We have to be free to be able to allow others to live their life as they choose without always coming through our influence. I liken it back to, when I grew up, I can remember, my grandmother, she was very quiet. She still had the telephone. It was a party line. Sometimes you would talk to her, sometimes you didn't. And you would have a relationship with her that was more in person. You would go to her house and you would visit with her and do things with her. I was the oldest of the grandchildren. So I got to ride in her car when she got her car in the 60s, when women were just getting their driver's licenses because, hey, her husband just died last year and it was cool because now he was gone. She could do what she wanted, So she kind of took me along and be able to take me and do those things. But then we look at the years of what are the years of 50s and 60s and 70s. There was a ton of abuse of women at the time. There was a lot of people wanting more. Look back at the 40s and 50s. Women didn't even finish high school. They didn't even finish grade school, some of them. You know, they were rather illiterate, just as men were then. And then all of a sudden in the 70s, just 20 years later, women were going to college. And it was like, holy crap, who do you think you are? You're going to be smarter than me kind of idea. So I think we as humans have grown so exponentially within the last probably 50, 60 years that our ways of our mental mind, it's just kind of like, I mean, when people say, I don't know, I'm so confused, it's sort of like, awesome, I'm so glad you're there too, you know, because we want to say, I mean, if you say if you're confused, say, that's great, because you know, and you can feel all of the change around you. Isn't that maybe what we've all been going through?
Absolutely. And one of the things we write a lot about in the book, if you don't mind my shifting this a little bit, but you sparked a thought, which is one of the things we gained a lot of compassion and respect for each other in the writing of this book was acknowledging and understanding for the first time. You know, I'm the daughter here. I actually never considered what it was like for my mom to be a young mom in the 70s with 2 young children, no family support. Her own mother had passed away, no female relatives close to help, a husband who was working full-time, living in New York City, trying to manage all of these things. So some things that I was very angry at my mom about, now as an adult and in writing the book, I have complete compassion for her, because who my mom was in 1979 as a young mom was not who she was in the 90s when she was parenting a teenager, and that's not who she is today. So on top of all of this mother-daughter dysfunction, we have a recovery journey too in our stories. So the person that I was when I was young and drinking is not even unrecognizable to the person I am today. So we have also, in coming back together, so much of our learning how to communicate and respect each other is also acknowledging what we've been through at different times and who we are today, not who we're angry at from 30 years ago.
I love that you said that, Lindsey, because basically we are changing all the time. And I think one of the things that people don't understand about mothers is that we're all mothers for the first time. And the mother that we are for our infants is not necessarily the, you know, we've gone through a lot of changes and we have a tremendous number of responsibilities. As our children are growing up, we are changing as much or maybe even more than they are, because we're aging. We have different changes to our bodies. We have work responsibilities. And then, you know, getting in, being grandparents, we're altogether different people. So I think that acknowledging the changes that we're all going through is really important.
I think also, too, the idea of a mother is you're really, as we would say, reflecting to others the world that you're experiencing, because you're in an inner circle. In other words, you've created this inner circle. And the definition of mother, father, brother, sister it's really just saying, oh, I have these within my inner circle, and my circle radiates out. But what's so vitally important in that, too, is that you are also teaching, which you've always done, nurtured, which you've always had that innate, and also, too, letting others know what you feel. Are you having a good day, a bad day? Are you having pain? Are you having this? Are you having that? But once you do that, you also, too, are showing them how to deal with grief and loss. Because you're losing a relationship. You're losing your little girl. You're losing the person you used to hang out with. You're losing someone who you may have taken care of or whatever. So you are truly showing them grief and loss and not even realizing you always think that I want to only show them the good of me. Well, what's that going to do for them, you know? They really need to know the full scope of life. So we've really shown them the full scope of life. That you've lost maybe a job. You maybe lost your children and moving across the country. You may lose your husband or whatever. Whatever it is, you are reflecting grief and loss to those behind you. And that's also a grave responsibility, don't you think?
I do, but and it's funny that you say that because years ago I thought it was very important for my children to know what I was feeling. But by the time they got to be in not Lindsey so much, but I would hear all the time, it's all about you. It's always about you. Because I know. But not necessarily the feelings that I was sharing was welcomed in a way that made me feel it was safe to tell my feelings, you know. And having lost my own mom, that was a grief that I carried for 30 years. It was very hard for me to get over that. So sharing my own grief it turned out, I think, and we can ask Lindsey whether she felt that was a burden that I shared my grief about that.
Mm-hmm. Are we asking me? You know, this is going to get a little deep. So this is what I would say. I think, again, and this is an adult speaking who's had a lot of time and guidance and insight to think about all of this. I think the fact that my mom shared a lot with me is the fundamental basis for how close we are. And I would also say this, you know, we read a little bit about you, and we were very excited to talk to you. You know, we both have a lot of empathic traits. Both of us do. And it's come out in my personality tests and all the rest of it. So I think in sharing a lot with me, she helped me develop into a very interesting person. But I also think it was a lot. You know, we had a dysfunctional family for sure. And I always, when I talk about that, I really like to say, look, this was the 80s and the early 90s. We just didn't know the things that we know now. Buzzwords like codependency, you know, these were not well known to us in New York City in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s. So it was all about how you looked on the outside. Are you performing? Is everybody in the right address in the right school? So we were kind of paying attention to that stuff. We weren't thinking, wow, every time one of us has a tantrum with the other one, how is that affecting them? So I do think as moms, one has to toe the line about what's appropriate to share. I probably didn't need to hear as much about their marriage as I did. But my mom, I was her protege. She taught me how to be a writer. She taught me how to understand people. And I think so many of those conversations really helped me to develop into a very compassionate person. But again, it's what you do with these things. You know, and we've both processed a lot around what happened. So I have a lot of, you know, I'm grateful for my experiences. I share them with others to help other people, that kind of thing.
I'd like to add something to that because I think in order for mothers and daughters to get along, you really need, Lindsey has taught me so much. She has taught me so much about spirituality. She has taught me, you know, so many of the things that she learned in her recovery, she shared with me, and I was able to incorporate in my own life. So it isn't only the lessons that mothers teach their daughters. It's whether mothers can learn also from their daughters, from their children. What can they learn? What can they incorporate? How can they be softer and more compassionate? And I think that those are traits that Lindsey taught me.
You know, I really look at it, if we look back on history, because it's, you know, the psychiatric and psychological people have really dished out a lot that has been inappropriate. The idea of codependency and co-this and co-that and dysfunctional, all that. The only people that do not have a dysfunctional relationship is the one that you create on the television. I mean, we have to be real about that. I mean, we seriously do. Because, and I think once we say that, it takes the monkey off a lot of people's backs and they start to open up. Also, the idea of perfection. I mean, I look back at that, like I said before, illiteracy was really profound, you know, in the 50s and 60s. All of a sudden, you went to college in the 70s and 80s. If you look at it, the 90s, you know, I've been in healthcare for over 5 decades. In the 90s, it was all about plastic surgery and making yourself this perfect little thing,
That's
whatever
right.
was supposed
Yep.
you know, was supposed to be. Then in the year, you know, the 2000s, it was like, now you're perfect, you're smart, you're intelligent, now go forth, and everybody blew up, you know. So I think the idea is what they blew up to was letting go of all of these names, traits, descriptions, and said, I want to be something more than the human story that's tacked onto me. So in essence, your book is about how can you open up into awareness, become a more open person, and leave all of the stories behind. You know, we always want to carry that with us. You know, you think about the story, you know, so much now people are saying, I need to heal my ancestral lineage. Oh, good grief. Those are people behind you, those ancestral lineages. Yes, we get it. Yes, you need to honor them and close the door. But you need to close the door. When you close the door, you release that part of you. It's almost as if you were walking around saying, it's now time to change my name. You know, I'm going to be something different, because you're free of that old dogma that has been profound with humans through eons. We see it through historical writings, philosophical writings. They keep tagging that old stuff onto our behinds, you know, and they keep saying that this has got to stay with you. No, it doesn't have to stay with you. It actually doesn't. So in essence, are we ready to say in a mother-daughter relationship, hey, she's my mom because she's older than me and she birthed me. Yeah, isn't that cool? But hey, we're friends. We're this. We're just two people exchanging things that go on in our daily life, but we are committed to unconditional love. Can it be as simple as that?
Well, I think you just distilled the entire book down into a few paragraphs, few sentences. I wish I'm going to write that down after we see this, because you actually got that completely right. Our entire goal is to stop pointing the finger at the other person, take a look at yourself, figure out what you can, look at that generational stuff, but for the same reason, to have some understanding and to be able to let it go. And what we are preaching here is compassion and understanding for the other person. We want mothers and daughters to be on the same team, to remember, you know, what you said to us at the beginning, like, you don't actually have to like somebody all the time or think that they're right or think that their views are right. We can live in a world where we can love and respect a mother or daughter who looks different, talks different, doesn't subscribe to our religious beliefs, our sexual identity beliefs. Like, that's what this is about, being able to say, I don't even know if I understand any of this, but I love you, so I'm going to give you the respect that you deserve. And what I would say is, it's not that simple, but it becomes a lot more simple when you have some of the tools that we're writing about in this book, when you know what your communication style is, when you know what your personality style is, when you can look at each other and say, okay, I'm really non-confrontational and you really are, and that's part of the problem here, but we're going to figure out ways around this. So it is the goal. It's not simple, but it can be done. And I got to tell you guys quickly, I had to speak this morning in a recovery group, and it was on this. So in 12-step recovery, we have something called the promises, and if you go through the process of doing the 12 steps, you're promised certain things, you know, a new freedom, a new happiness, not to regret the past. But the first part of this prayer is if we are painstaking about this process. And that's what I really talked about today, is you have to be painstaking about these processes. You can't just say, oh, this is what I want, so it's going to magically happen. You actually have to take the time to go through the steps, figure out what to do. So that's my 2 cents on that.
I have a question now. In Dr. Jeanette, in many of our interviews, people have said to interviewers and hosts have said, who are you? And I am just flabbergasted when I am asked that question because I don't know which direction to go when someone asks me that. So
right.
If I were to ask you, Dr. Jeanette, who are you? What would you say?
You know, I think it's so exciting that you asked that question because I've spoken about this 13 years ago when I started the show. And my media person would always say, you know, I've had websites since the late 90s when they first started. And she would always say, you need to update your biography. And I would put the words down, I am, and I do nothing else. And we've had this argument for 25 years. And there is no answer. There's not supposed to be an answer. The I am is whatever you perceive me to be. The I am is just I as the radiating soul, the spirit, the light. That's it in the high spiritual sense. But also, too, it's saying that I'm in this human form for today, and this is what I am experiencing. So in essence, you know, when people say there's a struggle or whatever you have going on, you say, I am, how about this? I am sick today. And so you're taking ownership of that and saying that your entire essence is encompassed in that definition. When in essence, really what the answer is, I am tired. I am experiencing sickness, illness today. Your experience is there, but you are tired. Or you're feeling alone, or you're feeling quiet, or whatever that might be. It's more of a what is your emotion today, but outside of whatever the story would bring forward. You know, no one knew who I was there. I would say, oh, I'm Chris's mom. And then she took me to the side and she says, stop saying that, stop saying that. And I'm going, why? And I couldn't understand that. You know, I just couldn't understand it. And I finally just said, you know what? I'm just going to be who I am. And who I was I just kind of milled around the people just to be in the presence. I didn't need to define who I was or how I got there, how I was in her life or wasn't in her life, or how she is or wasn't encompassed in my story. So I think that was really a really great time of letting go. So that's what we have to realize too, perhaps.
Wow.
Yeah. What?
Wow.
Go ahead, Mom.
Well, I just saying, it's interesting because she had a will and a desire that you had to comply with. I mean, she wanted you to comply, and that's sort of I'm at a loss for words. Because if Lindsey
can
said
I throw
that
something in there? I'll throw something in there. I feel, and I'm not trying to guess what's in your daughter's head. I'll do this from my point of view. If I had my mom at a party and she was doing that, I almost wonder if the feeling is, you're welcome here. You don't have to just be my mom to be in this room. I want you to feel comfortable being you. I wonder if that was the feeling behind it. You don't need anything but yourself to be in this room and enjoy it. But it's funny. I could see it also very clearly of, when my mom does that, I know she's probably feeling pretty proud.
Right.
Because we go a lot of places together now and we're speaking and she'll be like, I'm Lindsey's mom, and trust me, when I was getting in trouble, she wasn't raising her hand at the hospital to announce that. But, now it's such a different experience. But yeah, that's and isn't it fascinating how in these tiny moments, these tiny exchanges, they mean so much.
Mm-hmm. They do, and I think if we can just say, okay, that was just a glimpse of that moment in time, and not put so much emphasis on it to make it, in other words, that brick is not replicated all along our path. That brick is just simply that brick. Do you know what I mean? You know, sometimes we as mothers and daughters or whatever, we're always looking at something through that same story. We're saying, but you did it before, so I'm expecting it again. You know, all that similarity stuff. And that is, I hear it a lot, you know, with relatives or with people at end of life. They will say, well, she's not going to come. She never comes when I call the phone, you know. Or people would say, well, oh, here she comes. I know she's going to try to make things different for me in the way I'm passing on. You know what I mean? So we kind of construct a story of each other, and we're always navigating from it, yet we don't allow it to have its own morphing, perhaps?
I think that's exactly right. I love that. We wanted to represent something, and I'm going to share something, and I think Leslie will appreciate this. We had a little bit of a family thing last week, and some things were said, and blah, 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 and I really appreciate hearing what you just shared. That was just a moment, Mom. It was just a brick. We don't actually have to carry that conversation and the things that were said in that conversation. Because here's the thing. I have bad moments, and it doesn't happen a lot, but I had a bad moment at the vet last year, and I yelled at somebody and made her cry, and I can't even get over it. I still feel bad, and every time I go there, she hides from me. And, you know, I want grace. I want people to look at me and go, she was having a really bad day and going through a terrible breakup at that moment, and that's why she reacted that way. But I need to find that same grace for, you know, the person in our family who said some things, which I'm sure he didn't even mean. It was just that moment, that heated moment. So, yes, I agree. We have to let things morph and not assume that everything is what we think it is.
But also, too, I think it's really important to highlight at this moment is that why are we expecting everybody to be perfect? Why can we not honor the imperfection in someone? You know, my kids have always said, be careful, Mom has no filter. Be careful, she always knows what's going to go on. You can't hide anything from her. Being a medium myself, you know, it's like they can't hide anything from me, and I will say whatever it is. And I think we always expect the other person to fit this. Like, it's almost like if you remember back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they had the paper dolls that were cutouts, and you would cut out the little dresses to fit on them, you know, and you would just like pull the ends back on them to like, oh, this is my mom today. And it's sort of like, whoa, okay. What if Mom has holes in her stockings, she has on 2 different shoes, and she's smoking a cigarette, and she never hasn't brushed her hair for a week? Can she still be a mom? You know what I mean? And it's sort of like, how dare you say that? This is what a person is supposed to be. And we have gotten so... and this is, I am a person who always tills the soil for people. Who are we to say that we are so perfect that we cannot accept the imperfections of another? You know, I think it's so dehumanizing. It is so unangelic-like. It is quite incompassionate to be able to say when someone says something and it might hurt your feelings or whatever, to say, not turn it around and say, oh, I heard what you said. How are you feeling? And ask them. They have an emotion that they're trying to voice. It may have come across as a negative aspect, but they are having something go on within them that they don't have the tools to be able to voice, to connect, to be able to work through. But who are we to say that everybody should have the right tools? I'm going to teach them. You know, that whole thing, you know, it's going around now. Well, if you're still having that emotion, you must not have got it. You have to learn more. It's like, I don't have to learn anything. I'm experiencing my day to day. And I think when we can say that, it really opens up the door to allowing everyone to have every experience versus saying, I'm going to put up my barriers and boundaries and only engage with people within this parameter. Which side are you on, perhaps, yes?
Well, I agree with all of that, but what we're up against is so many people who are lacking the whatever it is, whether it's the know-how, the skills, the mindset. I mean, I completely agree with you, but I don't know how we teach this to people, because I think most people are running around thinking that they're right, that they know how to do things, and that they're probably, we all have limited points of view. And I'm not speaking to everybody, there are lots of enlightened people out there, but I think a lot are not. And, we've certainly run into a few things where we've done some interviews with people, and it was really clear some of the things we were talking about was the first time they've heard it. And certainly it happens a lot more in like deeply religious places. I was asked on one interview if I believed that Jesus could save me from my alcoholism. And spirituality, God is a part of recovery, but no, not God can't save me from my alcoholism. I have to save myself from my alcoholism. So it's an interesting thing to be running into a world where you've got everything. So what's the magic trick to getting people to be a little bit more open-minded?
I'd like to add something here. We have to go into the history of humankind, because there have always been rules for how women should be, always. Confucius had rules, and the Greeks had rules, and everybody has rules in every religion of how women should be. And they're pretty stringent rules. So although everything in our world has changed, particularly in the last 100 years, I mean, being able to drive a car, and, when I divorced my husband, even though I had been paying bills for a long time, I couldn't get a credit card in my name. So even though the world has completely changed with internet and lots of exchange of information, self-awareness and that freedom to be, even though they started Free to Be, Marlo Thomas, that the record Free to Be in the 70s, we're still not free to be, because we don't have that historical right to be, if you see what I'm saying. So it would be great if we could now be evolved, but we're not evolved because we haven't gotten rid of the rules yet, and we haven't created a place where it's safe to experience your feelings without fear.
I think sometimes the idea is that we have to realize, I've shared, the human experience is people want to say, oh, well, we are limitless, blah, blah, blah. We are not limitless in our human experience. The definition of a human is very limited. We are limited by our body. We are limited by the things that go through our mind. We are limited by, if I push on the door, it's going to open or close. Do you know what I mean? It's very limited kind of interaction every day. I think sometimes when we say, how can we get to a point where we can have relationships and conversations with others and still both come away with the feeling that we're okay, we are safe, we can talk to each other, but also, too, we respect each other, we honor each other, and we have compassion for each other in what they are having an experience of. Perhaps?
I think both people have to be willing. That's what I would say. And when I were in conflict as a mother and daughter, in terrible conflict, we literally couldn't agree on anything. It was because neither of us were willing. We're willing to do what you're talking about. And I think that in our relationships we have to both be willing. You can't have only one person be willing to change. I mean, I think that one person, either a mother or a daughter, can say, I have compassion, I have hope, I have love, and I have, I can love you no matter how you are. But that's one. That's not. Lindsay, finish this thought for me. You know what I'm thinking.
Well, it's a complicated thought. I say this is what I would add to this. What we were talking about at the beginning is part of the reason we wrote this book, which is sometimes there is somebody in the family who is not well. When you have somebody, whether it's the mother-daughter relationship or whatever the relationship is, if somebody is actively using alcohol and drugs in an unsafe way and unable to do anything about that, or unwilling, or there's untreated mental health issues, or there is any kind of abuse. One of the things we write about in the book is that, you don't have to not want to talk to somebody. You don't have to be punching somebody to be hurting them. Words have power. The way we treat our family members in front of other people has power. So we really want you to look at what you want from the relationship and what's possible from the relationship when you start to think about all of these things. And the first thing we want people to do is just work on themselves and see what happens with that start. So I do believe anything is possible with time and healing, but we also know some people are too difficult, some people are unwilling, and as women, we have to protect ourselves. We have to keep ourselves safe in every way, and even if that means sometimes having to put up really strong boundaries with a family member who's unwilling to communicate in a healthy way or just, act in basic respect, that's where the line is. So I do believe all of this is possible, but it depends on the family and the people.
I think sometimes we get stuck with the idea of ownership of a family. We have to do it because I've heard someone at end of life actually say, man, I really can't stand a parent they were talking about. And they said, I really can't stand this parent. And then they turned around, and then I said, well, why are you even doing this? And they said, because I'm a dutiful son. And I went, wow, that's a very heavy load to carry. But you have to understand that you chose to carry it. If you chose to carry it in that way, then maybe that's where your work needs to start. I think what I also, too, find is that we're all going to come and start having experiences of loss, as family members start to pass on. And I think a lot of the guilt, a lot of the shame, or a lot of the heavy weight gets passed down from eons. That's why, as we look at it now, we'll talk in closing about the idea of, closing these ancestral lineages. So many of us are here to do exactly that work. There are many of us, many people I've worked on that help do that. How do I close my ancestral lineage? How do I change the story going forward? How do I make things better for those behind myself? And I think that's very important to say, you've already started because you're in awareness. And really once people can say I attuned to something different, is there another possibility? In other words, hey, there's a handle on this door. I can open it and walk through. Hey, I have no idea what's out there, but I'm going to be afraid of what's there. I'm going to be scared of what's there. I don't know what's there or whatever's out there, but I'm going to take that first step. That's what we're talking about today about your book, The Mother-Daughter Relationship Makeover, is who's choosing to take the first step. Whatever it's going to be, you've got to walk through things in life, and we just have to say, oh, awesome, that's up for today. I'm going to take that coin, hold it in my hand, and I'm going to walk through whatever it brings. And just say, I own it. This is my progress for today. Perhaps?
Yeah,
wow,
I think
that.
planting the seed is absolutely the first step. And awareness often does lead to clarity. And, thinking about that story you shared about the person at their end of the life who felt, some regret for being the caretaker to a parent they didn't care about. what a great question to pose to yourself. You know, thinking towards the future, imagining yourself in that moment. Is this parent or person somebody you want to have spent a lifetime taking care of? Or can you imagine yourself in that position saying exactly the same thing? I mean, the one benefit of having alcoholism in our family was things got so difficult sometimes that it was very clear cut. Hey, you guys need to take a break so that nobody picks up a drink here. So in a way, that was an advantage to us. There was something very clear cut that the therapist could say, hey, you know, this could lead to something dangerous. And the reality is most people who do have a dysfunctional family member, they don't have anyone saying that. So they may spend their whole life dealing with them or taking care of them and never have anybody say, hey, this person might not be good for you. Right. So that's a very interesting story.
And it's also really important to understand that if someone is making you feel bad, making you feel hurt, making you feel shamed, that you need to be able to find awareness and be able to create boundaries and determine how much time or how little time you want to spend with that person, and do some healing around you know, whatever that person is or wherever they're coming from. That doesn't have to be your story.
Yeah. I definitely think that there's a lot out there over the decades. You know, people are living longer now. So there's a lot of people who are around. We're seeing 2, 3 generations all living at the same time. So there's really a lot of bouncing around of the old versus the new, and about the creating and about the old. So what we talked about today, I think, will help to enlighten others, inspire them, and say, I really don't know what the relationship is, and maybe I'll look at it. Others may say, I'm closing the door, I'm done with it. And still others will say, this is really a great job, let's get started. So what you've all shared with us today are those options, and it's up to each person to make their own choice, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, and it should be, yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Leslie and Lindsey, it was a pleasure to have you. Can you share with the listeners how to find out more information about your work?
Absolutely. The Mother-Daughter Relationship Makeover, 4 Steps to Bring Back the Love, can be purchased anywhere books are sold. And if you want to see more about us, we have a website called reachoutrecovery.com. That is a big behavioral health website. We do a lot on relationships, recovery, all things wellness. And you can find either Leslie or Lindsey, me, Leslie Glass and Lindsey Glass. We're both on everything, all platforms.
Social media, yes.
Very good. Well, it was such a pleasure to have you with us. We thank you so much for sharing your story. And I truly think that many will find that this is a great start. It's not the answer. It is not the template, but it is a great start, and that's a great place to be. So we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure.
If you'd like more information about Leslie and Lindsey Glass, again, the book is The Mother-Daughter Relationship Makeover, 4 Steps to Bring Back the Love. Please do click on the link on the bottom of today's show page to go directly to their website for more information. And it is about saying, where am I today? Evaluate your moment. Put it down on paper. Release all your emotions, all your anger, your frustration, the old story. And when you've done that, you can close that book, get a new notebook, and say, where would I like to be? How would I like to be going forward? And what would I like to accomplish, perceive, create, and engage in? It's up to you. You are truly the one, a design of your own life. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is Dr. Jeanette Gallagher, and until tomorrow, have a great day.
Today we discussed many life-changing concepts. Who do you turn to, and how do you know what is best when faced with a health crisis? Dr. Jeanette is a patient advocate. She listens to the patient, the doctors, and the family, clarifies the health issues and concerns, then helps the patient make the best choices going forward. If you would like help implementing change into your life and health, we can talk and see where you are stuck and how to improve the quality of your life. Check the link on the bottom of today's show page or visit drjeanettegallagher.com to schedule a phone appointment today.